During my daughter's wedding toast, the groom looked straight at me and called me a worthless liar in front of 180 guests. Crystal glasses froze halfway to lips. Forks hovered over plates. The band stopped mid-note like someone had cut the cord. I stood, crossed the parquet floor, and took the microphone without asking. 3 words. Steady and clean. Play the video. 180 heads turned toward the screen behind the cake. For clarity, my name is Margaret Maggie Coleman, and the bride is my daughter, Sarah Coleman. I manage a quiet, used bookstore and mind my own business until I can't. Today, I was done being polite. Today, I brought proof. Ryan Blake, my brand new son-in-law, smiled like the room belonged to him. It faltered when I didn't blink. Sarah's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Confusion sliding toward fear. And I felt the kind of calm that only shows up when a line has finally been crossed. The DJ glanced at the head table, waiting for permission that wasn't his to need. I nodded once. The way you do when there's nothing left to debate? The projector snapped awake, washing the wall in cold light. Every whisper in that ballroom died in the glow. I didn't raise my voice or explain myself. I didn't ask anyone to believe me. Not anymore. I simply let the room see what I had seen for months and swallowed my anger until this exact minute. If you want to understand how I reached this point, stay with me. Because this moment did not happen by accident. 10 months before that wedding day, everything still seemed perfect. Sarah had just announced her engagement to Ryan Blake, and the whole town seemed charmed by him. He was handsome, articulate, and always knew the right thing to say. I wanted to believe he was good for her. I really did. But something in his eyes never matched his smile. It was my neighbor, Janet Howard, who first cracked the illusion. Over lunch one afternoon, she mentioned seeing Ryan at Romano's restaurant with another woman. They weren't just having dinner. Maggie, she said carefully. They were kissing. The words hit me like a glass of cold water. That night I didn't sleep. The next day, I drove to his office downtown and waited in the parking garage with my hands shaking around a paper cup of coffee. At 1:15, Ryan appeared, laughing with a brunette in a designer suit. She touched his face, and he kissed her like a man with no secrets to hide. I lifted my phone and took the photos. Her car had a child's car seat in the back and a sticker that read Steele Family. The name meant nothing to me then, but later I would learn it belonged to Veronica Steele, his boss. I went home that afternoon with proof, thinking Sarah would finally see what kind of man she was marrying. I couldn't have been more wrong. That evening, I showed her the pictures. She looked at them for 3 seconds before handing the phone back. That's Veronica, his boss. They were at a client meeting, she said flatly. When I told her I'd watch them kiss, she stared at me like I'd lost my mind. She accused me of being jealous, of trying to control her life, of being unable to let her go. Every word felt like a door closing. Ryan had already planted the idea that I was the problem, and Sarah believed it completely. That night, I sat alone in the quiet house I'd built for her and realized something every mother dreads: my daughter no longer trusted me. But instinct don't lie. And mine told me Ryan Blake was hiding something far darker than an affair. 3 days after Sarah's outburst, Ryan called me himself. His voice was warm and confident, the kind men use when they think they're winning. He said he understood that transitions were hard for mothers, that I needed to let Sarah become independent. Every word dripped with condescension. He spoke to me like I was a stubborn child, not a woman who had spent decades building a life for the daughter he was now poisoning. When I told him I'd seen him with Veronica Steele, he laughed softly. He said I'd misinterpreted a professional meeting, and that people my age often confuse things they didn't understand. His tone was pure arrogance, the kind that assumes you're too old to fight back. That conversation changed something in me. I realized I couldn't win this with emotion or pleas. Ryan had already rewritten the narrative in Sarah's mind. If I wanted the truth to matter, I needed evidence strong enough to destroy his performance entirely. That week, I hired a private investigator named Jennifer Walsh. She was calm, efficient, and didn't flinch when I told her I wanted proof of infidelity and fraud. For the next 8 months, she documented Ryan's every move. The results shattered any lingering doubt I had left. Ryan wasn't just cheating with Veronica. They were running a calculated con. Every dollar, Sarah asked me for money for the house. The engagement party. His supposed credit debt was funneled straight into his affair. The engagement party funds paid for a Napa getaway. The house down payment turned into a week in Bermuda. My $43,000 had been the foundation of their luxury. Jennifer laid out photos on my kitchen table, hotel, receipts, en restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, all tied to the money I'd transferred. One photo showed Veronica's wrist glinting with a gold bracelet. The receipt beside it bore my bank's name, dated the same day Sarah had begged for emergency car repairs. It wasn't just theft. It was mockery. Veronica even posted a picture online, captioned, "Dinner with my favorite charity case." Ryan stood beside her, smiling. They were laughing at both me and my daughter. That night, I stared at those photographs until sunrise. My grief had turned into something sharper. I wasn't powerless anymore. I finally understood who Ryan Blake really was, a liar in a tailored suit, and I would make sure the entire world saw him without the mask. The rehearsal dinner was held at a downtown restaurant I had paid for but wasn't invited to help plan. The place looked elegant, filled with the kind of expensive simplicity Ryan loved to flaunt. Sarah was radiant, smiling easily in her silk dress, while I sat at the far end of the long table like an accessory no one wanted to acknowledge. I'd written most of the checks for this wedding. Yet somehow, I was the outsider. When it was time for toasts, Ryan stood with a glass of champagne and that practiced grin that had fooled nearly everyone in the room. He thanked friends, co-workers, and finally turned toward me. "It takes real maturity," he said, "to put aside control and support your daughter's choices." His tone was warm, but his eyes were sharp, watching for my reaction like a cat playing with a trapped bird. The guests laughed politely, not realizing the cruelty behind the words. Sarah smiled, proud of him, while I sat frozen, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Every sentence was a public performance, a way to frame me as the bitter mother learning to behave. Ryan finished with a smirk that said he believed he'd won, that I'd been put back in my place for good. Later that night, as I helped gather plates from the table, he cornered me near the bar. He thanked me again for my generosity, saying it must be hard to keep writing checks for a man I didn't approve of. Then he leaned in just enough for no one else to hear and said, "After tomorrow, she's mine completely." The words were soft but venomous. When he walked away, I didn't chase him or speak a word. I simply watched his back and realized something absolute. If I didn't act now, Sarah would be lost entirely and Ryan Blake would walk away clean. That night, I decided he wouldn't. The ceremony in the rose garden was picture perfect. All pale petals and bright vows. Sarah glowed the way daughters do when the world seems kind. Ryan Blake looked like a promise in a tux. Steady voice, steady smile. He spoke of loyalty while I counted the lies on his lips. I sat in the third row, exactly where the seating chart had parked me. Mothers usually sit in front, but I'd learned not to argue with people who need to choreograph love. When Ryan promised to forsake all others, he squeezed Sarah's hands like a seal pressed in wax. The hypocrisy rang like a bell only I could hear. By the time we moved into the ballroom, the band was warm and the champagne colder than the air. Ryan worked the tables like a candidate, all teeth and charm. He thanked vendors by name, charmed distant cousins, and kept his hand on Sarah's back like ownership. The necklace glinting at her throat drew admiration from every corner. When the room settled for remarks, Ryan stepped up with the confidence of a man who thinks nothing can touch him. He thanked everyone who believed in us, and then turned the story knife without blinking. He talked about women who see deception everywhere, about jealous minds that invent drama. The audience chuckled until the last line landed heavy. He lifted his glass toward me and called me a worthless liar. The word worthless did the job he wanted. Every eye went searching for mine. I did not flinch. I stood and crossed the room, each step quiet as a gavel. I took the microphone, looked at the DJ, and said 3 words. Play the video. No anger. No explanation. Just the instruction that ended the performance. The screen bloomed to life behind the cake. Cold light spilling over frosting roses. Veronica Steele appeared first. Crisp blouse. Office glass glittering behind her. Her voice was easy. Practiced. The kind used to close deals. She said after the wedding they'd need to be careful. But Sarah was naive enough to make it simple. Then Ryan stepped into frame. Sleeves rolled. Both hands visible because cowards love a prop. He laughed about nursing shifts and empty apartments. About plenty of time for us. He said my name like a punchline, bragging that I kept filling the tank. He called me an ATM with pearls. Veronica lifted her wrist and kissed him. That bracelet flashing under office lights. Ryan pulled out his phone and angled the screen to the camera, proud as a boy with a stolen trophy. An order confirmation gleamed for a diamond pendant. Veronica laughed because he was giving Sarah the exact same necklace. In the front row, Sarah's fingers rose to the chain at her throat. I watched understanding drain the color from her face. The necklace unclasped and slipped into her palm like a burning coin. It slid onto the tablecloth without a sound. Ryan lunged toward the DJ booth, but 2 groomsmen and Sarah's stepfather closed ranks without asking. Sarah didn't stand. She just said, "Let it play." And her voice carried like a verdict. The room stilled. The video kept going. They mapped out schedules and alibis like sales targets. They joked about my checks, about house money turning into flights and suites, about how easily Sarah defended him. Veronica called me Charity. Ryan called me Predictably. The laughter in that office felt louder than the band ever had. When the footage ended, the quiet had weight. I stepped back to the microphone and let the silence press through the carpet and into bone. I did not make a speech. I only gave the room the name of what it had just seen. That morning, before flowers were pinned and ties were straightened, I had handed a complete file to federal agents. Jennifer Walsh had packaged months of records and recordings, and the case number sat in my purse like a seal. If Ryan wanted to call me a liar, he could try it in a room where perjury mattered. Today's reveal was not revenge without teeth. Ryan stopped struggling and went still in that unnatural way of men who finally see the cliff under their feet. He looked at Sarah as if charm could still do its old work. It could not. She stared through him like a broken mirror. I turned from the mic and met my daughter's eyes. And for the first time in months, I saw her looking at the same world I was seeing. The guests did not whisper anymore. They were learning the cost of pretty stories. The necklace on the table caught a stray beam of light and shone like a warning flare. The music would never find its way back after this. I did not offer comfort, and I did not apologize. I had warned. I had been mocked. And now I had shown. The room had asked for proof, and I had delivered it. On a day devoted to vows, I kept mine to the truth. 3 days after the wedding, my phone rang. Sarah's voice was flat, the kind that comes after a storm when there's nothing left to break. She didn't cry or rage. She simply asked for the financial records I'd collected on Ryan Blake. She wanted every file, every receipt, every photo I had. I told her I'd bring them. But she refused. She said she couldn't look at me yet. Then she said something that cut deeper than any insult Ryan had ever thrown at me. "You could have shown me privately." Mom, you wanted revenge more than you wanted to protect me. I didn't argue. She was grieving a marriage that had never really existed. The next morning, she called again, her voice trembling this time. Ryan had emptied their joint accounts, $47,000 gone overnight. The house she thought they bought together was in his name only. He'd left her with nothing but debt and shame. For the first time since the wedding, I felt pity stronger than anger. I forwarded everything to her attorney and to Jennifer Walsh, who was still tracking Ryan's movements. A week later, Jennifer showed up at my bookstore with a folder thick enough to silence every doubt. Ryan Blake wasn't just a cheater or a thief. He was a professional con artist operating under multiple aliases across several states. His real name was Ryan Hoffman. And Sarah wasn't his first victim. There were at least 3 other women who had been charmed, isolated, drained, and abandoned. Jennifer said my public reveal had forced him to flee before completing his next phase, which included transferring Sarah's remaining assets and disappearing completely. My so-called revenge had interrupted his extraction plan. That night, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen and understood the second truth beneath the humiliation. The wedding wasn't just an ending, it had been an intervention. My act of vengeance had saved my daughter from being erased financially and emotionally, just like the women before her. Sometimes justice hides behind the mask of revenge. I hadn't only exposed a liar, I had stopped a predator mid-scam. And for the first time in months, I slept without guilt. 6 months after the wedding disaster, Sarah and I sat in a federal courtroom as Ryan Hoffman and Veronica Steele faced judgment. The walls were cold marble, the kind that amplifies every whispered truth. The prosecutor called them sophisticated predators who exploited trust as currency. When the judge sentenced Ryan to 22 years and Veronica to 18, the sound of the gavel felt like oxygen. Sarah didn't look at him as he was led away in cuffs. She just exhaled, as if holding her breath since the day she said "I do." Outside the courthouse, she took my arm for the first time in months. Her voice was quiet, steady. "It's finally over." I asked if she was all right, and she nodded. "Getting there," she said. "Therapy helped, but getting back $97,000 from seized assets helped more." She'd started working again, renting a small apartment near her clinic. The scars were still there, but they were no longer open wounds. We sat together on a bench outside the courthouse, watching people pass ordinary lives untouched by deception. Sarah told me she'd started dating again. A teacher named Michael who'd been through his own kind of heartbreak. This time, she'd asked Jennifer Walsh to run a background check before saying yes to dinner. I laughed, and so did she. Before we left, Sarah turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "Your revenge saved me. Mom, I thought you humiliated me, but you actually freed me." Her words didn't erase the pain, but they gave it purpose. As we walked to the parking lot, sunlight hit the courthouse steps, bright and clean. Justice, at last, had found its way home. And this time, it didn't need my anger to carry it there. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this story spoke to you, please subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And if you carry a story of your own I invite you to share it in the comments. Your voice matters here. Always.